Proud sponsor and supporter of the IRFU Mini Rugby Festivals.
Game on 2FM.
Weekdays from 7.
And you're very welcome to Game On here on 2FM. We're broadcasting live from the Aviva Fan Studio at the Aviva Stadium in Dublin. We have our live studio audience. We have a Six Nations weekend approaching, and we have an expert panel to talk us through the weekend. Ladies and gentlemen, you're all very welcome. So, introducing that panel tonight, and please put your hands together. We have Shane Jennings, Damien Varley, Sophie Spence, and Reggie Corrigan. And you're all very welcome, ladies and gents. Obviously, plenty to talk about between now and 8 o'clock. Just some housekeeping to get through as well. We're going to have some questions from our studio audience as we go along in the show. So have a think. If there's anything you'd like to ask the lads, please let Andrew know. He's going to go around with the microphone, or Dermot a little bit later on, and we'll come to you as time goes by. And if you want to get in touch on social media, if you're listening on the radio, hashtag Aviva Fan Studio. And if you have any questions for the lads, you can use it using that. Okay, we'll get straight in. Reggie, good to have you. You've had your fair share of battles against the Italians over the years. I mean, is it something that you look forward to, or is it something you just got to get through, given how they play rugby?
I think you look forward to every international match. If you get the opportunity to be out there, you want to enjoy it if you can. Probably a number of years ago, Italy were considered a little bit of a soft touch, so it's maybe one of the games you might have looked forward to more, that you might be able to be a little bit more expressive in, although I do remember quite vividly losing to Italy in Bologna, which wasn't the greatest experience in the world, but it is always a very tough physical game. You're expecting that. You know you're going to be sore after it, but in general, I think it's a game you'd look forward to. I
mean, Rory Best has spoken today about the fact that Ireland are just going to have to prepare for a battle and go to war, and using these kind of terminology. So Ireland have to front up here and get the job done in the pack. Is that the first and foremost what you want to see?
Yeah, well, that is the point about Italy. As I said, years ago they might have been looked as a soft touch, but they're certainly not anymore. And the physicality of the game is what they bring to it, and they pride themselves in that. They want to make sure that if all else fails, they're going to put in the tackles, put in the hits, be very physical with the opposition. And for many teams, and we've seen it already in this championship, that can come as somewhat as a surprise. Certainly, if you take them for granted, you could be found out. And that has happened in the past on many an occasion with Italy. And I think what Rory Best is talking about is that he's trying to get the message out there that this Irish team isn't taking them for granted. And that may be somewhat reflected in Joe Schmidt's selection as well, to give respect to the opposition and not to take them for granted and think that this is a game we will win.
Our second front row forward on the panel, Damien Varley. I mean, in terms of when you know a team is going to present a challenge to you up front, does it kind of bring out the best of you? Did it bring out the best of you as a hooker and as a forward? Is it something that you relish?
I think so. I mean, you're always going, as a front row, you're always thinking about the collisions, and there's no other team like someone like Italy who have very strong set pieces that you're going to target those areas, and particularly you want to prove yourself in those areas. I mean, they're going to come hammer and tongs at us to prove a point. They're in the media the last couple of days saying that they want to create an upset into a struggling Irish team.
Yeah.
So obviously, in every contact area, I think that's where Joe is going to try and target. And with that, as Reggie said, you can see with the selection, he doesn't want to take this for granted. I mean, there's issues of selection that I'm sure we'll talk about, but yeah. It's going to be physical. You see the way they performed. They gave France a scare. They were a bit annihilated in the latter end of the Scottish game, but they're turning up and they're out to prove points.
What about the women's game, Sophie? The Italian women's team. Is it a kind of a stereotype to say that the Italians just bring this brute force? Are they as physical in the women's team, in your experience?
I think the Italian team, from the women's point of view, they're intelligent, but they're a bit smaller.
Okay.
So I suppose that's what they've got to use as the strength. You can't underestimate them at all. They've definitely developed this year as well. We've seen them kind of get on the front foot against England to start off with, and they weren't too far behind them to finish off. So I think they're going to have their own surprises, and again, just like Rory Best said, we have to be ready for battle, I suppose, as an Irish squad.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I mentioned this earlier on. The starting team was named by Tom Tierney today, and you're switched to number 8 for this weekend. You looking forward to that one?
Definitely exciting times.
Yeah.
I suppose I'm looking forward to get my hands on the ball more, and I suppose be a bit of a devil at that and link in with the backs more.
And you're not bad at it, in fairness, but I mean, you maybe have struggled this season to get as much ball as maybe you're used to. Has that been a bit of frustration for you?
I suppose as a player, you always want to get your hands on the ball more, and I suppose this position might work a bit better for me, the way we're playing at the moment. But I suppose it's down to your individual performance, you know. So hopefully I can get into the game straight away and, you know, start from there.
Has Tom given you any kind of specific instructions of what he wants? I mean, more of the same. Get our hands on it as much as possible.
Yeah, I think get into the game early.
Okay.
You know, carry ball. Carry hard as well, and don't shy away from the game.
Yeah, okay. Well, obviously the Italians have, Shane, probably one of the best number 8s in the world still, even at, 31, 32 years of age, Sergio Parise. I mean, what are they going to do when he retires, first of all?
Yeah, he's an elf, isn't he? Yeah, he has such an influence on their whole squad and has done for years and years and years. Their captain, obviously, this week, the hooker, has been just ruled out as well. So you'd imagine Sergio Parise will take on the captaincy. Unfortunately for them, they just rely so much on him. And you can see every time they get into the opposition 22, he either catches the ball, works his way to the back of the ball and gets his hands on the ball, because I don't think he trusts anybody to actually finish the job. So
he doesn't trust them to drop kick either after the Spence game.
I think we all probably rated he probably could have got it as well, which was probably a bit of a shock. But his skill level, his understanding of the game is far and away probably superior than any of the other number 8s, which are all good number 8s. They got strong ball carrying, but he's got nice subtle touches that he does every game, and he's done it consistently for the number of years. But I think it's a good focus point for Ireland. Like every team that plays against him, you stop him, you're going in the right direction to stopping the Italians. So listen, the stereotypes suit, because that's what they've been doing consistently over the last number of years under this coaching regime. So, you know, they're going to be confrontational. You know, they're going to rely on their set piece. So it's up to Ireland to make sure that their set piece is good, that we get possession from it and we get into good areas of the field. Because I do think if we can raise the pace when we get into the 22, they are big men, so you have to try and fatigue them. So I'm sure that will be a focus for Ireland for the weekend. But I'm glad Parise is playing. He's always good to watch.
Yeah, no, he's brilliant to watch, and everything they seem to do well goes through him. I mean, for someone like Josh van der Flyer, obviously 7's the position you played, it's a big test for him, and I suppose a huge part of stopping Parise will come through Josh van der Flyer. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, I think he's a different challenge in comparison to the English number 8, Billy Vunipola, because he's such a powerful, huge man. With Parise, you would back Josh or anybody to tackle him a bit easier. I know the stats last week showed, I think there was 10 different players in the Irish team that I think missed one-on-one tackles with Billy Vunipola. That's just the power that guy brings. But I think when you're playing against Parise, you have to be careful of his offload. So if you go low like Josh does the whole time, which he's very effective of, the fellas either side or around Josh in the defensive line have to be aware of that offload for trail runners or for quick recycling of the ball. So if you go and try and tag the ball on Parise, he's very strong and he can shrug you. So you got to vary it. And but like any player, like any number 8, like anybody, if you get your line speed right and you put them under pressure and you test their skill set, they aren't probably as good as you'd expect them to be. And I think that's what we could probably learn from the England game, is that the amount of effort and endeavour and guts that we showed, if we'd have just got more line speed and put them under pressure, they might not got as much momentum. So hopefully you'll see a bit of learnings from the last game. And it's going to be a big test for Josh again. But he did very well, so he deserves a lot of credit. And he should go in confident, because he's a good bloke, he's tough, and he just has to do his job and not worry about anybody else, and they'll look after him.
That line speed that Shane's talking about, Damien, is there aggression? Is that a big part to play in this? In just the mindset of wanting to get up as quick as you can and make as many tackles as you can, and actually say, look, lads, you're in a game here and we're not going to lie down without a fight.
Yeah, line speed is a huge thing for many reasons. One, you don't want to give them too much time on the ball. You want to close that down, and it also it provokes a bit of enthusiasm and a bit of fight in you. The thing about Parise is he's an unbelievable fighter, insofar as every time he goes into contact, he's not just trying to recycle the ball, he's going to do something, and we need to be able to have that extra dimension of physicality to be able to grapple him and to get him to the ground. I think that's going to be Josh's remit, to be able to do that. And, you know, Joe, on the back of Les Kiss the last number of years, line speed and defence has always been the key thing, outside in, to shut that down.
And it hasn't been there, really, as I suppose as obvious as it has been over the last few seasons. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, well, I think probably right across areas that we've been trying to do, we've been a little bit slow off the mark. And obviously defence is an area that wins games. So when we're slow on that, there's huge repercussions for us, and teams begin to build momentum on it. So it is a huge thing, and it's something that Joe continuously harps on about in meetings, is to focus on that line speed and get that aggression up very quickly.
Reggie, I mean, line speed, aggression, Damien used the word fight there in the team, and these are all elements that Ireland maybe have been a little bit lacking in over the last few matches. And I go back to the France game, the incident with Maestri, the hit on Sexton, the incident with Garado where he took out Dave Carney was a late hit. Even Mike Brown against Conor Murray, and make of it what you will. But I'm just saying, I suppose the point has been made that maybe Ireland are a little bit too standoffish and allowing their opponents too much time to get into games.
Well, all of those incidents you mentioned there were nothing to do with line speed or defence. I mean, they're off-the-ball incidents that weren't caught out.
But in terms of a mindset, though, I mean, the mindset of getting up to make those hits, are we a little bit standoffish overall?
I don't believe so. I think you have to put it into context of the players that are out there on the pitch. I mean, you're right in saying that our defence hasn't been as good as it has been in years gone by. And there's been a few holes and a few leaks. I'd have to say when Jared Payne was playing at 13 in the games that he was in, the defence was better organised. There's no question about that. I think maybe last week it wasn't quite as strong as it had been when Payne was there. But then again, you have to balance it. You know, do you want to have this amazing defence and no attack? Or do you take the chance a little bit like we did with McCluskey there and Robbie, you know, that centre partnership that might be more creative in the attack sense? And you have to remember as well, a lot of these young players are finding their feet at this level. So defensively, they're finding their way there too. I don't think that this Irish team hasn't been confrontational. The incidents you mentioned, you know, okay, we probably need to get in their face a little bit and be a bit more reactive to it rather than just letting them pass by. Certainly if the officials aren't going to deal with it, then it's down to the team to deal with it on the pitch. But I you know, there has been change. There has been a lot of injury. We can't, I know people have been talking about injury a lot, but you can't just negate that. And injury is a factor in this. And if you don't have the personnel there that are used to being in those situations in defence, it's not going to perform as well as quickly. So it has to be given time to develop with the personnel that's there, and then that defence will come. But for me, I'm more interested in the attack. I think our defence has been solid. I think it's something that can be fixed in the next few games. But for me, it's more about attack and what we're seeing there, and who do we see to do that.
Okay, so just on the team then, I mean, Stuart McCluskey hasn't made the 23. Jared Payne is back in, but he's in it at outside centre, and Simon Zebo has come in at full back. So what do you make of the team? Are you enthused by this? Are you excited by it?
No, in all honesty, as an Irish rugby fan, I'm a bit disappointed by the selection. You know, we qualified it at the very beginning of this conversation by saying that quite evidently Joe Schmidt is paying respect to the Italians. He's worried about not getting another result. He needs to break the form of the moment where they've been losing games and put some confidence into this team. So he's gone with a kind of a tried and tested, safe format, let's call it, for this Italian game. But as an Irish rugby fan, I'm disappointed by that. I see these two games as a great opportunity to have a look at McCluskey. I think he didn't do anything wrong last week. He had a good performance. I liked the combination of himself and Henshaw in the centre. I thought it worked well. You have to give Robbie Henshaw some time to develop in that 13 role, which is a very different role to the one he's been in. And you know, a lot of the press conference today spoke about the fact that Jared Payne hadn't been tested in full back. Well, he's been tested in full back in Ulster all season long, and has proven himself to be very adequate in that position. So personally, I would have loved to have seen McCluskey kept in that centre position, maybe Payne moved back to the full back role in the absence of Rob Kearney through injury. And let's see what happens there. And I think a lot of people would have reacted better to that. Albeit I know why he's doing it. I'm just not so sure that everybody wants to see that.
You know, dropping a player, Sophie, after the first cap, and you know, Joe Schmidt has explained his reasons for picking, say, Fergus McFadden on the bench because he gives you more off it. But just generally, in any sport, if you come into a team and you play a match and you're not there the second game, you're bound to take that personally, no matter what the coach says to you.
Yeah, I suppose you're always going to be disheartened. You know, it's like starting one week and then being on the bench the next to then go on the high bench as well. But I suppose from a player's point of view, you've got to turn that disappointment into determination and look for what are the areas that I have to improve on and build on your strengths as well to fight back into getting that jersey, whether it's a starting jersey to sit on the bench. But I suppose that's the beauty of being part of a squad. You've always got to compete against others to be be the best, and that's what should drive you as well.
What does Tom place in your squad on? Where does the balance come between attack and defence? And Reggie says he wants to see more concentration on the Irish attack, and we're going to get into that now. Where is it at with Tom Tierney and the current squad at the moment? How much emphasis does he place on defence versus attack?
I think because there's a lot of new girls in the squad now, and I think it's important that everyone's kind of on the same page, and the learning is very different from, I suppose, senior players to new players, but you have to be able to obviously know your plays and things and what's going to go ahead in attack. From a defensive point of view, I don't think we've probably been as strong this season. But again, people are still learning. But I think the main focus has probably been on attack. And then, you know, we have been a solid side in defence, I suppose, from girls bringing to this level for such a long period of time. But I think because there's so many new girls in the squad that there's so little time as well for us to prepare, that we have had to focus more on attack.
The Jared Payne thing, Shane, as well, is every time his name has been mentioned, it's accompanied by he made these tremendous reads, which he does, and defensively he's such a key linchpin for Ireland. Yet, are we sacrificing, first of all, his skills as a fullback, which are well documented, and second of all, the potential of someone like Robbie Henshaw as an attacking 13 versus what Jared gives you in defence? Do you think?
Yeah, well, it comes straight back to the argument. Do we want to win games or do we want to develop players for the next World Cup? And I think we're a pretty demanding supporter base and we've got high expectations, and that not necessarily is the fairest thing for the squad. And they've taken a lot of heat this campaign because they haven't got the results that maybe we all wanted them or expected them to do. So from Joey's point, listen, if I was a coach or if I was a player, I don't really care what the public think. I want to win. And if that's by a point, I've won a game. You
really?
Always 100%.
That's it.
Yeah, it really is. And it's the pressure environment that they're in. A win is so much better than what they're going through at the moment. Like, let's put it into context. They drew at Wales. I thought their defensive effort and their line speed was really good. They did some really good stuff in Wales. They were very close to Paris after not playing so well. And listen, the best team won in England, but they showed a lot of good things as well. I think what we've touched on here, in terms of consistency with the players that are there have been injuries, and that's very, very difficult. And it's not as if I'm defending them because I'm close to the game or just come out of it or I had Joe as a coach. That's the reality of it. Now, as a supporter, I'd love to see the likes of these young players come through, because then you go, do you know what? Even if you lose and you see this young blood coming through or this effort or this enthusiasm, everybody can back that. Everybody can get behind that. And I think that's where we're kind of being a bit critical, that on occasions you're seeing experienced internationals, I won't say underperforming, but not because they're not getting the wins. We're quick to point the finger, and that is, if that's fair, I don't know.
But is it not getting the wins while also playing a certain style of rugby, which might not be the most entertaining rugby in the world?
No, I agree, and that's a fair comment. And I think that's what we'd all like to see: a bit more adventure, a bit more appreciation for space, a bit more creativity, because they do have it. But I do genuinely think they're afraid to make mistakes, and I think they're in an opportunity now where they should be somewhat liberated, because they're not winning. They're not winning the championship. They've got an opportunity. You know what? We'll give it a crack here. We'll try and develop. We'll try add a few things to our game. But at the cold light of day, it's so important commercially, pressure on the players, that they need the win.
Sure.
And I think that's shown in selection, and I think that's what that kind of sense of people being uptight, it comes across that way, where you'd love to see, listen, everybody knows Joe's a good coach. Everybody knows it's a good coaching ticket. There's good people there. So let's have the opinion that we might change a bit, and we say, do you know what? Let's develop for the World Cup. We're going to go through some tough times, but we've got a bigger picture here.
Yeah, Damien, I mean, these are all phenomenally talented footballers. I mean, they're the best in the country of what we have. So I suppose some people will refuse to believe that these guys can't play a more entertaining and convincing style of rugby, that would actually be better to watch, first of all, and we're just being honest here, but also that could get results. I mean, the two don't have to be mutually exclusive, I don't think.
Yeah, but I think we have to look at it from different points of view, and I think Shane makes some good points. I mean, every player wants to play, so whether McCluskey starts and Jared Payne is disappointed or whatnot, but I think we're in a very unique situation that we've performed average and come close a few times in the last couple of weeks. But now that there's the top three left, Ireland and Italy, Scotland, we are in a very good position to start developing for the World Cup and to start blooding guys. I know there's a huge commercial element and there's a huge player element of wanting results and wanting to win consistently, but I think that's where Joe needs to, weigh things up. And we've seen the effect that when certain guys have left some of the provinces in the last couple of years, how the provinces have almost taken a step back, and that's having a knock-on effect into Ireland and the national campaign. So we have to have a more proactive development. And as I said, it's a unique and prime opportunity against Italy at home for the next 2 games to start blooding guys, give McCluskey a chance, give Delan a chance, and get these guys in. Even at the tighter position, we need more experience there under Mike Ross.
Mike Ross is 36 now.
And I know the 2 guys have maybe struggled at times in the first few games against more difficult opponents, but
they're going to learn though, surely.
You need experience, particularly in positions across the front row. You need to be in trouble in a scrum, and you need to learn how to adapt with that. And by consistently getting the guys in there to learn, they will develop, and we'll be in a stronger position in 4 years' time. The public probably won't like it currently, and the commercial element of it won't be happy. The media won't like it. But as players ignore the media most of the time, from a development point of view, that's the stance that we need to take. And you need to go through these tough times in order to be in a far superior position in 4 years' time.
Damien, I'm not so sure the public wouldn't like it though either, because if you look at the English game last week where the new players were given an opportunity, there wasn't a big backlash. We lost a game to England. Didn't really, we got a couple of opportunities, got a little bit unlucky with Van der Fleer's try, things like that. But there wasn't a big backlash in my eyes from the public. It was, well, at least we got some young talent coming through. It was a gallant effort. We know there's injuries. It was almost as if they were forgiving for the fact that we tried something. So...
Yeah, a fair point, and I think it probably goes, and it's probably very cyclical as to how many games we can lose. But there has to be kind of a 2-pronged attack that we do need to win and we need to progress, but we need development and we need a stronger squad in 2019 than we possibly had in 2015.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with what Reggie just said, because Shane, I left, I watched the match in my local club, and the reaction was, okay, we lost, but you know what? Every time Sexton got the ball in a bit of space, he ran for it and tried to release the back line. Robbie Henshaw made a few nice breaks. Delan comes off the bench for 15 minutes and is like a monster, right? First cap coming off the bench. Van der Fleer, as you said, had a really good game. And people are saying, hang on, the future actually is pretty good because these guys are the next generation. And if this is what's to come, we can buy into this. So why aren't we giving them more of a chance?
Hugh, I'm not the coach. I agree with you. No, listen, I'm on the same page. I agree with you.
Yeah.
Because I felt that I was over in London, and there was a sense of optimism. There was a sense of, you know what, these young fellas, I've seen them play with their province and they've done really well.
Yeah.
They got a shot. We didn't win, okay, not ideal, but they certainly put in a good performance, and you can see that progression. So, yeah, listen, I totally agree with you.
It's never been the way, though, Hugh. Let's be honest about it in Irish rugby. It's never been the way that we're going to take that flyer, have a go, take a chance, because in the past, with every single Irish coach there's ever been, in my time and long before it, it's been a case of, we got to win the match. We have to win the match. And if I don't win a few matches, I'm out in my ear. So there's that fear factor. Now, Joe Schmidt shouldn't have that, because he's proven fantastic coach. Everybody
got money in the bank.
Everybody wants him to be the coach. Shane said it. We all know it's the right coaching ticket, but it can't be that there's some sort of influence beyond the coach making these decisions and being willing to take this chance. That, I hope, isn't the situation. That I've just got to get a win in the bag to keep, whoever it might be. We mentioned commercial elements. We mentioned the fact that the Irish team have to do well, win a game or two just to keep the whole
offers going.
Yeah, exactly. And that can't be the situation.
But it appears that is the situation.
Well, if it is, then it's very wrong. That would have to be stated. And I don't... Look, who knows? Maybe it is the situation. We don't know what goes on behind closed doors, but I'd like to believe that Joe Schmidt has the ability and wherewithal to make those decisions himself. But that being said, this decision and the selection is very conservative for him, given the fact that the players we mentioned didn't perform badly.
That's it. And I heard Stephen Ferris speaking last night. Shane has mentioned already, and it's been mentioned by a few former players, that there seems to be this fear in the Irish camp that if they make a mistake, they're going to be hauled over the coals for it. And that's why they won't try that 50-50 pass if there's a try scoring opportunity, because they're afraid of the consequences. And that's not a way to send a team out, is it? And again, I'm just asking a question here.
Oh, I don't know. I never served under Joe Schmidt as a coach, as a player, but I mean, I'm not... fear factor, I don't know that they're afraid to make a mistake. It's probably, the scrutiny is so detailed afterwards. I understand where the lads are coming from. He expects very, very high standards of the players, and if they do make a mistake, he'll want to know exactly why that mistake was made. You can't, as a coach, and I wouldn't say that he does, you can't stifle a little bit of natural flair. For God's sake, Shane, you'd remember it when we had Felipe Contepome playing in Leinster. If that was the case, he'd never have played a game for Leinster.
Yeah.
That's the reality of the situation. You want players to take the initiative, do something different. Brian Driscoll did it for years. Do something out of the ordinary, and that's what makes them great. So you can never stifle that. I don't believe that's the situation. But maybe they do need to be given a little bit more of a longer lead to try a couple of things. And if there is that fear factor, well, then that's something that needs to be worked out within the squad.
Sophie, there has to be a balance, doesn't there, between what the coach wants a team to do and what the players to do in individual positions versus allowing them to play the game as they see it. I mean, there has to be some natural instinctive play as well as the coach tactics.
Yeah, I suppose once you enter on the pitch, you're left alone as players. So I suppose you have that game plan that you have to go with the coaches have set in place. But when you're out on the pitch, it can be a lonely place with the other 14 girls around you. But we're the ones who make the decisions, from the set piece to what play we're going to play. And I think it's important that people are encouraged as well to work towards their strengths. And that's why we all play rugby, for the enjoyment and for that competitive element. And we want to show what our strengths are as a team as well as an individual point of view.
How would you respond to a coach who just was very kind of regimented in how he wanted you to perform? I mean, are you a player that, would you say you play the game a lot on instinct? Is it a combination of the two?
I think I'd be very frustrated and probably wouldn't be playing to my full potential. So I think it's something that's important that you have a good balance with the coach where you can talk to them and be able to, I suppose, work to your strengths and communicate that effectively. I think that's what it comes down to, the communication channel.
What was Rob Penny like, Damien, as a coach in terms of that licence to play the game? How did you find playing underneath him?
He was completely different to Joe, and there was no. He was very open. He would allow. He'd give you the framework, and he'd allow you to play. But I think just in Joe's defence, I don't think he'd be overly harsh on players doing 50-50 passes. He creates these starter plays, and he's more of a stickler on detail and where guys should be at certain times in the game. But I think he does give them a little bit of free rein to do certain things and allow people to play the game. But he's anti. Stupid 50-50s.
Okay,
to put it bluntly.
Right.
So you have to be able to read that as a player as to
and then justify why
is this a blind pass or am I looking and trying to do it? And they're the little details that Joe will hammer players on.
There's a perception that Simon Ziwa maybe suffers in the fact that he's a hugely instinctive player and always has been since he was a kid. That I suppose whatever feels good to him, he'll try. Do you think that's fair? That perhaps, and he's playing at full back this weekend, so obviously Joe Schmidt has faith in him that he'll do a job there. But do you think that maybe he has suffered internationally for Ireland because of that, or is there something else?
No, I don't think so. I mean, he when Joe came on board first, Simon was an integral part of the team, and he is one of those players that relies on flair and style, and he doesn't want to be constricted by almost rules and regulations of how you should play. More so the likes of front rows like me wanted to be told,
sure,
hit this ruck and you'll do it. People like Simon, they're looking and they need that freedom. I think probably part of Simon's problem is that Munster have been doing so badly and haven't played that cohesively together as a team, and that has a huge knock-on effect up the ranks, and possibly that's why there's no taking away that Carney is a much better fullback and a more secure guy, and Joe may be a bit more comfortable with that than Simon's flair, but Simon has performed on that stage.
I thought that, and I think maybe a few people thought that perhaps when Felix Jones had to retire, that there was an opening there for Munster at full back, and that Simon Zebo might be the person to take that jersey. And it hasn't happened for whatever reason. Obviously, Anthony Foley feels that Andrew Conway is a better option there. But I just would have been interested to see the development of Simon Zebo in that position, given like 4 or 5 months of continuous play at fullback?
Yeah, but I mean, we probably need to ask Simon whereas he's preferred. I mean, he loves being on the wing, and players need to have that input rather than being pulled and dragged into different positions. So I think Andrew wanted fullback for the last couple of years, and he's getting a shot at it, and he's performing fairly well at it. And Simon wants that freedom on the wing. Now, obviously, every player jumps at an opportunity to wear a jersey, and they'll play where they want to be pushed, but we kind of need to focus on where they want to play also.
Okay, Shane, just in terms of, just go back to the style thing again, because this is something that's come up. Joe Schmidt at Leinster, when you were playing there, were probably one of the most attractive teams to watch with the way they played. So I suppose, you have to kind of balance whatever criticisms there is against Joe Schmidt by the fact that he certainly knows how to play different styles of rugby, but has just chosen to take this route with Ireland for whatever reason. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah, I think we all also have to understand that it's not apples for apples. I think you had a pool of resources and players that were all coming towards the peak of their professional career in terms of age profile, in terms of experience. And what Damien touched on earlier on, like Leinster went through a very difficult time for a while, and that was the fuel, or that was the kind of kickstart that they needed. It was a cause, it was a personal issue at the start. And Joe gets a lot of credit, but a lot of credit has to go to the likes of Mike Brewer, who was the forwards coach for years, Michael Cheika, who put in good foundations. And without that, you wouldn't have been able to kick on. Like Michael Cheika would have got us to a certain degree or a certain level of play, but he didn't have the technical ability at that stage in his coaching career to drive us on, and Joe did. So he had the likes. You had a partnership of Gordon Darcy and Brian O'Driscoll that had been together for God knows how many tests and how many games, So when you have that consistency, you get confidence. And I think what we're seeing in Ireland at the moment is there is a lack of confidence because everybody's down their throats. Everybody's kind of saying, well, you're not playing the most attractive rugby and the wins aren't coming. So confidence is an issue. And then when you're not confident and you're hesitant to go for 50-50s and you make a mistake, that's a nightmare. That's a disaster. So I think there was a lot of good stuff done in Leinster. There's a huge rivalry with Munster where they didn't enjoy seeing Munster being successful, and that was a massive influence on Leinster for years and the players that were there. The younger generation that came through Leinster had this kind of reflected glory, and they were going, God, you know what? It's easy to be a professional at Leinster. We've come into an environment where we've got beautiful facilities, we're winning trophies, we're winning Heineken Cups. Well, that's not the reality. That was a peak.
So they don't understand what it took to get there.
100%. And I think Munster had the exact same. What Munster had for a number of seasons being the most successful team in Europe, like Wasp, like Leicester, like Toulouse, that consistency over a large number of years is very difficult to maintain. So their norm is under that peak somewhere. Where that is difficult to say. But I think the player personnel that's with Ireland isn't comparable to what it was at Leinster at that time. And I think that's where you have to get the balance. I don't think people, well, they probably do, but they don't fully understand the intangible qualities the likes of Paul O'Connell had on the squad. Like he gave people confidence, and he gave people, like, they stood taller beside him. I know that sounds cheesy and it's hard to explain, but they did. And he had that effect on people, as did Brian, through his skill level as well. So when you lose people in an environment such as those, it takes time to get that cycle of player to come. And you got to give the likes of Peter O'Mahony time to become a leader, to develop, to evolve, to rely on other players that he can trust around the park. Like Rory Best is one of the greatest guys you'll meet. But he's coming to the end of that. But he has a number of players that he will rely on. But you need the likes of Jack McGrath, who's a great leader, Rhys Ruddock, these kind of guys. These younger generation need to get a bit of, like, they have to take ownership. And it's the opportunity that they have now to actually, you know what? It's funny, like when you retire, you go, I wish I'd enjoyed it more. I wish I'd have done this more. I wish I'd, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's very hard to understand that and do that when you're playing. But I think that's where they need the likes of the older players in the squad to actually understand that it's we're on the way out. It's your team. You got to take ownership here. And like, if a coach says something, you got to be able to challenge them in a constructive way.
Yeah.
You're not throwing your toys out because you're not selective. You're going, what do I need to do? What do we need to do to get better? How can we learn from that and take ownership and take it away from Joe and the coaching team a bit? So that takes time, and you have to be mature and you have to be strong people within the group to be able to do that. But it will come.
I'll never forget the Munster win against Harlequins at the Stoop in the quarterfinals of the Heineken Cup a few years back. Paul O'Connell was just back from injury, and Munster just got out of the group, had to travel away. And the leadership qualities that Shane speaks of there were just embodied by him that day, because he went out, grabbed the game by the scruff of the neck, the players all responded, and the result was just this incredible performance, an incredible away victory that not many people had predicted.
Yeah, well, I think Shane has nailed it there in what he's saying. I mean, we can look at coaches, and obviously they have the final say in selection, but it is the group of players, and Leinster and Munster have been blessed for the last 15, 16 years with it, and the last number of years we've struggled with it, that the up-and-coming guys haven't taken that ownership.
Why haven't they? Is it because they've just been too used to, as Shane said, coming into an environment where they didn't have to?
Well, I don't know. I mean, possibly, I think, we'll say in the early 90s when Munster were beginning, they had a group of maybe 8 guys who challenged each other and who were accountable to each other before they were ever accountable to coaches. And I think that has possibly slightly drifted away currently. And I think that's the start of a huge effect from a national point of view. I think a group of players is the key foundation for any kind of success, and you need to be able to, as Shane said, challenge coaches. And everyone wants to play, but you have to understand the dynamic of what's in front of you. And I think if you can develop that in the provinces and allow that to filter into the national side, we'll be looking very good in 4 years.
Sophie, the Irish women's team have lost a lot of leaders over the last few years, an awful lot of leaders actually. I'm just wondering how the players in the squad this year and even maybe last year have responded to that. Have they taken ownership of it?
Yeah, I suppose it's kind of the same thing for us as well. Huge leaders that had retired after the World Cup, like Fiona Coughlin, Lynn Cantwell, and it's kind of big shoes to fill. But I think there's a number of people who are stepping up, and obviously it's baby steps as well. It's not something automatically you say, right, it's my time and I'm going to become a big leader. It's something that takes time, and it's a process, and it's about people backing you as well, and you've got that support network, and definitely taking ownership as a players group, to understand what we're doing as a group and what we're aiming for as well.
Yeah, I mean, Reggie, in terms of the leadership issue and the younger guys coming through, is there anything you've coached? I mean, is there anything that the coaches can do to try and inspire that among the younger guys? Is it something that has to evolve organically? Do they just have to take ownership themselves?
No, well, I suppose there's a couple of elements to it, but the first one would be that all of the people that have been mentioned so far, who have been great leaders, were all very secure in their position. They were willing to take a risk, and to be a great leader, you have to take a risk. Otherwise, you're just going to be one of the sheep who follows along. You got to be stand out from the crowd and take the burden of responsibility on your shoulders. And that's not an easy thing to do. And it certainly isn't an easy thing to do for younger players, inexperienced players who are going out there. And if we're honest about it, their main thought in their heads as a young player is probably, I want to make sure I do my job well today so that I'm getting picked next week.
Okay.
So
there's a selfishness
they're not going to stick their head. Well, it's not a selfishness. It's survival, I suppose. But I mean, they're not going to stick their head above the parapet at a young age. So the players who are more experienced, and Shane and Damien and have mentioned a couple of them within the men's team, it's the likes of Conor Murray. It's the likes of someone like Johnny Sexton, who does do it, who does take on these responsibilities, and Jack McGrath to an extent, who is now an established member of the Irish team. Devon Toner is another example of it, and Jamie Heaslip. These are the people that need to stick their heads out and be the leaders to bring those young people on and take that responsibility. And they do it, but probably we need to do it more. In the past, and I think the lads hit on some very good points there about Paul O'Connell and Brian O'Driscoll, there probably was an over-reliance on those two guys to do a lot of that speaking in meetings and in the organisation and to go to the coach and present ideas. I mean, if they didn't like what a coach was doing, they were well enough able to tell him and felt secure enough in their own position to be able to do so. And maybe we're being overly critical on Joe Schmidt by saying that he's dictatorial. It might not be the case. Maybe there's nobody going to him. Maybe there's nobody actually standing up and saying, look, I don't agree with you there, because they're afraid to, because they're not secure enough in their own position. So that's what being a leader is about, having confidence in your own position and then being willing to stick your neck out at times when it's needed.
In terms of the tournament overall, Shane, have you enjoyed the Six Nations this year? We got the Super Saturday finish last season, and it seemed to kind of gloss over what had been a pretty average tournament before that. In terms of the 3 games and 3 rounds we've seen so far, would you enjoy it? Is it rugby that you want to sit down and watch?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's no substitute for it. It's unbelievable. We're very fortunate here. We've represented our country, and you just can't replace that. And it's very difficult when you go from being a former player to watching games. You're kind of going, God, do you miss it? Do you not miss it? Do you want to get away from it? Well, certainly that's what I'm feeling, because I've only retired recently. But there's no like I was in London, and the atmosphere, like, it's just infectious to be around, and the occasion is so enjoyable. And it's great to watch it. And when you see guys, okay, we said the result, but they put in such a good shift, and you could see the effort they put in. Like, how can you not enjoy that? The Wales game, when they started the game so well, was brilliant. Paris was frustrating because it was there for the taking. And listen, it's not an easy place to go, and yet we still could have done it. So I think it's been great, yeah. It's different rugby. You know what I mean? Everybody goes, oh, is it better down in Super Rugby with the Southern Hemisphere? It's different. It's not apples for apples again. But, like, I think you can see, certainly from the World Cup, as a spectator, you'd love to see Ireland throw the ball around a bit more, like we saw Argentina do, like we saw, and like we were talking about kind of 50-50 offloads and calculated risk kind of movements and things like that. That will be accepted if you're trying. I think the things that frustrate the coaches is when you're sloppy in possession. So if you go into contact and you're loose on the ground and you give up possession easily, you work so hard to get possession, and when someone does that, it's an easy target for the coach to go, what are you doing there? You need to fight hard. You need to get your top shoulder over. And then it gets technical, and that's when people get tight. So if they looked after those basics, which they're so capable of doing, that's when New Zealand are the best. They look after the ball, they hold on to the ball, and their passes are accurate. They catch the ball, they're very difficult to get the ball back off. So they do the basics better than anybody. So I think if we had an appreciation of just concentrating, like Simon Zebo's very exciting, but he'll go on an outside break, he'll do some kind of dummy, he might die with the ball, and he might lose it in possession. I said might about 3 times there. If he could go into the possession, guaranteed to get the ball back, guaranteed to make the right decision, not every time, but just that perception is there that he doesn't do it all the time. So that's why there's always this question mark over him. Jared Payne is probably more a bit of a calculated player. You don't see him coughing up the ball that much. You don't see him giving a bad pass. You don't see him knocking on. You know what I mean? He does the basics very, very well. And funny enough, he's from New Zealand.
Yeah.
So, like, that's the way it is. And I think if we can just do those better, and it's easy from the sidelines, but if you can concentrate on doing that better, retaining possession, you saw how good we are when we have the ball and we can retain the ball, like Johnny running at those angles, Robbie getting a bit more confidence, and getting the likes of Ulton Delan coming on. You know what I mean? So there's the opportunity, I feel. But I think if you just bring it back to the basic, look after the ball a bit better, make sure when you go into contact, you don't have to go into a brick wall, you can find a bit of a hole somewhere, and just do the basics better. And I think people will enjoy watching that, because then the pace will get into the game, then the crowd will get in and that kind of stuff. So
yeah, Damien, this is what everybody, I suppose, New Zealand, they are the yardstick because they're the world champions and they play a certain brand of rugby. But as Shane just said, they're just so good at doing the basic things really, really well. And when you simplify the game, it is a simple game, really.
Yeah, it is a very simple game, and we're probably guilty of overcomplicating it in these kind of discussions. But
been very serious tonight, folks, by the way. Sorry about that. We'll have a bit of crack in the air. We'll have some questions in a minute. But yeah, go on.
It is all about the basics. And once you have them and you're very secure in doing everything, all the basics well, you can easily build and adapt, and then you can start implementing whatever game plan is right for the players that are involved in any particular campaign.
Okay, I have to ask you about the new faces into the team this weekend. Obviously, Ali Miller's back on the wing, but she's going to be working in the back three with 2 new caps, and you're pretty excited to see how they get on.
Yeah, definitely. I think Ali brings, I suppose it's the Ali Miller kind of momentum that she does, and it's fantastic to have her back as part of the squad. And the 2 new girls, Kim Flood, has been part of the Sevens squad. So really excited to see them 3 working together, and they have lovely pace, lovely footwork, and I think once they have ball in hand, they'll do some really good work.
Just after I was over the France game in Perpignan, and that was a game that Ireland could have won, and maybe a couple of chances in key positional areas weren't taken. Is that something you've looked to address over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, I think, you look at our set piece, we didn't work as a full 8. That was a problem that we've addressed going into the England game, and the ruck contact area. We weren't able to deliver the ball for a 9, so that's a big thing that we've worked on. And then, it's the small margins with the unforced errors. We have to keep them to the minimum, and I think that's going to be so important. at any level, never mind international level, and going forward as a squad.
Niamh Briggs is playing in the centre. Mm-hmm. So that's another positional switch. She's obviously comfortable enough with that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very exciting as well to see her and Sene work together.
Two physical players.
Yeah, I think they'll be a really good combo together. It'll be some good rugby as well there.
Okay, brilliant stuff. We have some questions, I think. Dermot from the floor, if you wouldn't mind speaking up. Thanks a million.
Hello, I'm Libby. Shane mentioned Argentina there. I was just wondering if the panel have any ideas as to how we could replicate Argentina and reinvent ourselves quickly to lead world rugby as opposed to focusing on attritional rugby that we are at the moment.
Reggie, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, well, nice easy one, thanks.
Sign Graham Henry, how about that?
Brilliant pass there, Hugh. One of your better ones, by the way. I was at the game unfortunately, that we were beaten by Argentina in the World Cup. And I have to say it was an absolute joy to watch them. They really were, as painful as it was as an Irish supporter there, they were incredible to watch. And by all accounts, I didn't have any idea they were half as good as they were when I was going into that match. I was very confident about us getting a victory. I think the injuries had a lot to do with it. But watching them play the game, there was, beforehand, they were warming up, they were totally relaxed. They were, throwing these passes around. Their skill levels had gone to another level from where I'd remember the Argentinian skill levels being. They would have been in the bracket of Italy many years ago in terms of a big physical bruising team that would come and beat you up basically, but may not have a whole lot more beyond that. But they've completely changed and focused on their skills. And I think it was something that in Shane's time with Leinster that Joe Schmidt definitely tended to concentrate on a lot was the skills, the actual ball handling skills of the players. And I do often wonder if Joe Schmidt is dealt a bit of a harsh hand in the sense that I'm looking at the provinces now and I don't see those skill levels the same way as they were when Joe Schmidt was there at that time. And
of course, he doesn't have that time with the players.
He doesn't have the time with the players, so it's the provinces who are developing the players in terms of their skill levels. And I think all the provinces are suffering as a result of that. We're seeing that by the results that they're getting. So have the skill levels in the provinces dropped, and as a result of that, is that having a knock-on effect to the national team? And that could well be the case because, as we said, Joe Schmidt doesn't get that time to work on skills. He's a very limited window. But Argentina very dramatically changed their game 4 years ago in terms of they just threw out the old rule book and decided we're going to go for a different type of game, and our focus is going to be on moving the ball at all costs. Our offloading game is going to be increased. We're going to try and not go to ground with the ball. We're going to pass out of the tackle. We're going to pass before the tackle. We're just going to keep that ball alive at all costs. It's the way France used to play back in the day when they were good. Unfortunately, it's gone from their game. They could do it going to Argentina for a while. But I think that's a huge factor of it, and I think we need to look at doing something similar.
Yeah, and I think, Shane, Libby's question is a view that's echoed by a lot of fans who are saying, hang on a second, if Argentina can do it, why can't we do it?
Yeah, easier said than done. I totally agree. And I don't fully appreciate and understand what they did. Did they do it from literally, you hear when I think the former New Zealand coach Graham Henry came in after the last World Cup and then said, listen, from the top down, this is the way we're going to. Every provincial team, every coaching setup, every under 21s, sevens, this is a skill set that we need to develop. This is the story goes, and there obviously is elements of truth to it. But player population, I don't know the numbers. I don't know what resources they have. They have the seven circuit that they've been very good at over the years. So that does develop a skill set, and it has allowed very quick, agile players to develop, and they've transitioned into the 15s game as well. But like the thing that's quite impressive as well is they're young men. Like these guys, these wingers were 21, 22, centres that were 23. So it's quite frightening how they've got whatever academy structure they've had and whatever coaching strategies they've implemented at a young age. They're seeing the value of it.
And it's brilliant though, isn't it?
It is. It's so enjoyable to watch.
Yeah.
And it's not as if they're doing anything crazy. They're just holding a bit of depth. There's a bit of animation. There's footwork. There's an appreciation to get the ball to space. They're manipulating defenders to make them uncomfortable. And they're analysing defences like every other team does. But it's just incredible to watch. It's brilliant.
And Damien, Shane used the word different. It's different in the Northern Hemisphere to how it is in the Southern Hemisphere. And absolutely, there are merits to both games. But I suppose if you were asking rugby fans, which game do you want to watch? Do you want to watch what's being played in the Southern Hemisphere, or do you want to watch what's going on here in the Six Nations at the moment? What would they tell you?
They want to watch both. The Six Nations is possibly one of the best competitions in the world. You know, I think fans just want to watch good rugby. They want to watch players give it their all. They want to watch physicality. They want to watch a certain amount of skill. Well, it doesn't matter northern or southern hemisphere. It doesn't matter what competition. But the Six Nations, the following that it has, is massive. So, you know, I don't think we can take away from what the Six Nations
I think
is
the last
doing.
week's game in England, that
Yeah.
was as good a game of rugby as I've seen in a long time.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And it didn't have what we were talking about there, about these wide passes, this kind of expansive game, but it was still captivating to watch, you know. So they both have their merits and they both have their values.
Bonus points, Reggie, for the Six Nations? Yes or no?
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Yeah, okay. And one quick one from Ben Woods, who wants to know, is South Africa the right place to blood players? I mean, thoughts on Jackson McCluskey, Henshaw Group, maybe even Gary Ringrose? Obviously, they're a physical L unit, but would South Africa be the place to bring them down as a summer tour?
Well, I think you've got an extended squad when you go on tour, so it's probably a good place to give them a feel for the whole thing. Whether or not you throw them in at the deep end against South Africa now is another story. You might bring them along for to get into the squad system, but I'd try and bring as strong a team as I could to South Africa, having experienced it down there.
Okay, and we're almost out of time, I think. My thanks to the lads. Before we go, just a prediction ahead of the weekend. Put you on the line if you don't mind.
21-13 to Ireland.
Okay, so Ireland to win, but only just.
I think just about as well. I'd say 18-12.
18-12 again. Yeah, not only just the two games, please. Your own match, and how many tries are you going to score from number 8?
Give me one, I'll be happy. I think it's going to be close margins in both.
Okay, all right. And Reg?
I'll go with Ireland. I'll go a little bit more optimistic than the lads. They have a new 10 and we'll see if we can rattle him a little bit. I think we'll probably win between 12 to 15 points.
Okay, good stuff. Lads, thanks many for your time as always. Thanks to our live Aviva Fan Studio here and to everyone who took part in the show and to the listeners as well. We're back tomorrow night, but for the moment, from Shane, from Damien, Sophie, from Reggie and myself, a good night and thanks very much.
Game on.